Welcome once again, friends. So, as I was saying in the beginning, we will be going through some verses of the Bhagavad Gita. And the verses which we have picked for this evening, there are 6 of them from chapter 28, the science of the yoga of the Supreme Person. And as I was reading these verses, it struck me once again how important it is to have a guru. Even though these verses don't speak of the topic of the guru, you will see that the teachings expressed in the entire Bhagavad Gita, but as Swamiji said, in some verses more than others, is just so profound, so deep, of course so blissful, because we are understanding a way out, but it is so profound, and on one level we might say so beyond our day-to-day interactions or understanding, that many times you may wonder, how on earth am I going to accomplish this? Or maybe even we may have this thought that we wasted so much time without even knowing these basic teachings. But the story that comes to my mind is of a lady who was an atheist all her life till she was 80 years of age, and one day got converted by listening to Yogananda ji, came to his ashram, and Master said within a few years she found liberation. And that is a very interesting, that shows us that we may sometimes not know anything about these teachings. Of course, it's good to know them when we do come to know them early enough. But if we have not known the key part over here on one's spiritual progress, is the Guru's grace, God's grace, and of course our effort is required. So let us see these beautiful scientific verses that are chosen for today. Verse first. The blessed Lord said, "They, the wise, speak of the imperishable Ashwatha tree, with its roots above and its branches below. Its leaves are the Vedic hymns. Whosoever understands this tree of life knows the meaning of the Vedas." This is the first verse. What does it mean by this tree? Where is this tree? The scriptures, especially in yoga science, in Raja Yoga, describe the human body to be that tree, but in an upside down, upturned fashion. It is said that this body is the tree, the spine is the trunk of the tree. Then the brain cells, neurons you might say, and also our hair. But by extension, we live in 3 bodies at the same time, Yogananda ji's guru taught. One is the physical body, which we are very familiar with. Then behind that, prior to that, comes the astral body of energy. And then a causal body of thoughts or ideational body. And Yogananda ji said God created us that way. And it is, he's beyond, just beyond the causal body. And by approaching, knowing how to penetrate these 3 veils, we can merge our consciousness with him. And so the roots of this tree, which is upside down, are the energy, strings you might say, which represent the physical hair. And that's why many yogis, they grow long hair, because it is known in yoga that long hair can bring a lot of energy, cosmic energy into our brain. I have heard of many people, Swami Kiranandaji himself, who suffered with a headache at some point, but by keeping long hair, their headaches vanished, or sometimes, bad dreams can also be cured by this treatment, and that's why many yogis have long hair. So the hair and the energy which is streaming in from what is known as the crown chakra, the Sahasrara, that is the root, you might say. Then it enters into the spine, which is the trunk. And then, what are the branches of this tree? Paramahansa Yogananda ji very subtly explains that those branches are the 3 gunas, the streams of consciousness which is flowing out of that spine. They are the Sattva guna, which is a very ennobling state of consciousness, Rajasic, which is a very activating, energizing kind of energy. And those, as a doctor, I can tell you that all the nerves in our body originate from the spine. So if I have to do some sort of activity, basically the electricity or the energy for that activity is going to come through the nerves and through the spine and then come out. So going back to the streams of consciousness of the 3 gunas, which is expressed to different degrees in different people, form the branches that emanate from our spine. The third branch, of course, being the tamasic guna, which is a very inertia or lazy attitude that we may have. So this tree over here, Lord Krishna is saying, is the everlasting tree. But naturally, if we are calling this body the tree, we would know that it is not everlasting, or we would think it is not. But then he explains how it is. He said that, you see, the physical body is perishable, so that does not last forever. But more lasting than the physical is the causal, astral, and then the causal. And then very beautifully, Yogananda ji is explaining that even it is everlasting because its roots, its creation lies in God Himself. God dreamt us, became us. He manifested His consciousness through everything. Here we are talking of the human body. So it is He who manifested Himself, and thereby He is without birth, He is without death. And even after, let's say, somebody finds God and leaves this frame. Once I remember we were at tea at somebody's house with Swami Kriyananda ji. And Swamiji at that time, this was just a few years before his passing, would occasionally speak about his chances of leaving the body soon. And people said that, Swamiji, even though you go to the astral world, we will miss you. And Swamiji was very quick to correct. He says, I have no intentions of leaving any footprints in the astral or the causal worlds. Which is to say that he was headed straight back to God. It is a state called liberation when we find there's no karma which impels us to come back. But here when we are talking of the tree, that is what Krishna is saying, that try to understand that your body, physical, astral and causal, are those trees. But even when you merge back in me, he says, the creative principle, or you might say or visualize it as the thought intention of God to make us, lasts forever. And it is very interesting, and that's why I was starting my satsang today by saying that how profound, how eternal are these truths. It is a joy to learn them. Let's go to the second verse over here now. Krishna says, its branches extend below and above, nurtured by the gunas as we studied. Its buds are the sense objects. Small roots extend also, they go upward, but he's saying they extend also downward into the world of men, impelling man to action. So it's very interesting. And one point I'd like to make over here, why did he speak of the Ashwatha tree? What is the Ashwatha tree? Well, Kriyananda ji explains it is like the peepal tree or the fig tree. And if you've seen one, it is called Indica religiosa, it's the religious tree of India. It just has these fluttering, shimmering leaves all the time. And those leaves, which are spoken of as the Vedic hymns, are the sensory inputs that we get. Vedas are said to be the scriptures which tell us how to live properly. And that we can see that our conditioning in this life through the physical body happens through the senses, the eyes, nose, touch, smell and such. So when those leaves are fluttering, we are operating through that tree and we are getting our inputs. In the second verse, though, Krishna mentions something very interesting. He says some of these branches, now we said the tree is upside down, roots above, stem and the branches going down. He says, but some of these branches are upturned, at the same time some of the roots are downturned. And Kriyananda ji says that, we have a visualization and suddenly when we read these details, suddenly it confuses or we can get confused. But he makes a very interesting point. He says, you see, visualization can only serve to a certain point. No visualization is perfect, but the knowledge that is presented over here is the way truth is. So what is that root which is coming down? Krishna explains that we all survive by what is known as the cosmic energy. I said that is what is drawn through the hair, through the Sahasrara and the top chakras into the body, and we live. But sometimes our consciousness or our energy is also derived from other things around us. Think of people who are not very strong. Many of us sometimes have been like that. And we derive our energy from other people. So, or other things, or our likes and dislikes. When we do that, Krishna is saying that some of those roots are downturned, and it is these roots and the energy circuit, you might say, which is being, coursing through these channels, which impels us to come back into creation. On one level, we may say, my goodness, why did God put us into this creation? But even Buddha, the enlightened one, he said, don't waste time asking or pondering that question a bit too much. We can sometimes, even a saint said, develop bitterness towards God and lose our little devotion that we have garnered so far. The better question to ask is, how can I get out? And what lies on the other side? As we will read in the future verses, Krishna says, you will attain me if you come by this way. And he is joy personified, eternity, for eternity. And then Krishna also says some of the branches are turned upwards, which, as I explained, we have the sattva, rajas and tamas, and there are certain streams of our energy, ways in which we act, which are uplifting, and this world is a mix of all of those. And Krishna is explaining those subtle points over here. Coming to the third and fourth verse. The true nature of this tree, its beginning, its end, its continuity, cannot be understood by ordinary men. The sage, having felled this Ashwatha tree at its roots with the axe of non-attachment, thinks, I seek refuge only in the primeval Purusha, from whom issues all creation, rather than under the protection of any tree. He seeks the supreme goal, from which there is no need to return. And in the beginning I mentioned that we have these three different bodies. So what Lord Krishna is saying in these two verses is that ultimately we should, the final goal, it says in the Bhagavad Gita, in Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda ji says, God comes to every soul with a natural inevitability. So that inevitability, that goal that we find is called cosmic consciousness, the state of samadhi, the state of true yoga, oneness with God. And in that state, it is said in that verse that we no longer need the tree. We have, by the practice of non-attachment. Non-attachment, Paramahansa Yogananda ji used to tell his very close disciples, along with attunement, he says these two principles, there are many attitudes which we should all try to adopt, especially according to our own needs. But he said universally, ultimately, finally, these are the two attitudes that every devotee should develop. Non-attachment to our body, to the way we relate to the world, even I would say to the knowledge we have developed of this world. It's very good to operate in this world. Paramahansa Yogananda ji especially was a saint of that kind. He never moved away from the world as it was. And he said that you should be able to attain that state while performing your God-given duties, your dharma. And that is a wonderful quality, that we are where God has placed us, but we still are able to develop the understanding that this is not the final frontier. Many people are driven to that point by extreme dispassion, which comes by suffering in the past, by knowing in our soul memory that this simply is not going to fulfill my heart's desire. It will not give me happiness. A good example is Swami Kriyananda ji. He said he was born in a very nice house, had wonderful parents, very good friends, was a wealthy home, and he said he was quite talented already in college. But he said, I just knew. He said actually another time, he said, I couldn't imagine a worse hell or a worse life than that. And for him, God was the only answer. And we all have to reach that point. Somebody once asked Swamiji, is it possible to reduce this journey, which the Bhagavad Gita says can span into many, many millions of lifetimes as a human alone? Somebody asked Swamiji, can we cut it short? And he said, of course. He says, by discrimination, by devotion, by love. He says, love is a wonderful shortcut. He said, in my own case, if I had developed devotion earlier, my journey could have been cut short. Think about it. He also mentions in these verses in the explanation that ultimately you do not even make spiritual progress. He says, what do you finally do is realize your true nature the way God made you. And it is smriti, it is an understanding that this is how God intended it. Towards the end of my satsang, in a few minutes, I will share a story with you all of a lady I met today who had a very remarkable life. And that will give us some perspective of how even the most exemplary life as a human being still falls greatly short of the attainment of God realization. The final two verses, those reach the eternal goal who crave no human honor, who are free from infatuation, having severed the bonds of attachment, who are untouched by the pairs of opposites such as pleasure and pain, and who are established in the self within, where shines neither sun nor moon nor the light of fire, there lies my abode. Those who reach it pass beyond birth and death. Such hidden messages. I am eternally grateful to Yogananda ji and Swamiji for explaining these verses. Krishna says, passing beyond the sun, the moon and the fire. What are those things? Well, the fire is the fire of the Manipur Chakra, where our ability to control life force is situated. Life force, also known as prana, is what animates everything in existence, Yogananda ji said. But it is most easily understood and felt. We can experience it in our own selves. It is, you might say, life itself. Many times we just wake up and we say, I'm feeling so good in our feelings, in our body, and we just feel nice. People who are ill physically or mentally, you can see their life force is down and they are not feeling so good. Ultimately, when life force leaves the body, we die. And we say, in India we say, inhone pran tyag diye hain, or somebody has surrendered or given up his prana. And ideally that is how everybody should pass away. In higher ages, I believe that is how everybody must be leaving their body. You give your prana, it was a gift from God, it was a learning process, it was for your education and entertainment, as Yogananda ji said. Now happily you have to return it to God, you have fulfilled the things He had asked of you, and we return back to God. So that is the fire. What is the moon? The moon is said to be situated or symbolized by the medulla oblongata in our body, which is also the seat of the ego. And Krishna is saying, you have to go beyond the fire, the moon and the sun to reach me. What is the sun? The sun is the light or the wisdom, the awakening, opening of the spiritual eye, and Yogananda ji said by extension the Sahasrara Chakra, the 1,000-petal lotus at the top of the head, the 7th chakra. That when we have brought the energy back in this tree, the Ashwatha tree, from the leaves through the branches, from Tamasic, Rajaguna, Sattva-guna, into the spine, it is also known as the Kundalini energy at the base of the spine. We gently coax it through attitudes, spiritual practices, devotion, serving others, self-forgetfulness. We bring this energy up. When it has totally come up, it passes, as I said, through the Manipur Chakra, where the energy has been controlled and gathered. First we have to bring it to that point. Then we lift it up through the heart, offer our ego, the greatest stumbling block on the spiritual path. Yogananda ji said, ultimately the weight of the ego becomes the most crushing weight in the universe. So we want to surrender that weight. And you can now imagine why I started in the beginning by saying that a guru is absolutely essential if we want to find God, because through His grace, through His power, Lord Christ said, to as many as came to Him, gave He the power to become the sons of God. Intellectual knowledge, or even Yogananda ji said willingness, is not sufficient. You need that power, like how a rocket is sent up. You need that force, and that force is provided by the Guru. And also we have to, Yogananda ji said, prepare our nerves, prepare our body through yoga practice and devotion. And then we are able to finally project our awareness, our consciousness from this point to attain enlightenment, and then through the Sahasrara to attain what is called liberation. Now, Yogananda ji mentioned that it is very good to not wait too long to begin this process, or I should say to wrap up this process. A wonderful thing to do would be to always live in readiness, in the consciousness. As we started our meditation, we said, let's imagine the body's energy to be located at the point between the two eyebrows, because friends, honestly, in truth, that is where the soul resides. That is where we already are. It's just that we've forgotten, and in this dream we get conditioned by what people say, how they relate. Of course, it's a very real dream, and hence we start operating on that level. And hence the importance of yoga, spiritual practices, spiritual company. But in your mind, in your knowledge, always Yogananda used to persuade and coax people to realize that they are already one with that consciousness. Of course, he says you cannot imagine it, but remember it and move in that direction. It requires a lot of willpower and courage and support. But let us not live too long in the further, lesser degrees of consciousness. So by that, Krishna is saying, you attain my abode and you never descend. You are never compelled to be reborn. Now, Paramahansa Yogananda ji also said that all who take these teachings seriously can become Jivan Muktas, which is to say free from the ego while they are living, can become saints in this life. And I honestly believe that it is the highest goal we are called to. We all do different things. We are born in different countries and families with different gender and whatnot. It is because of the power or the force of our past. We are exactly the way we should be, and this is but what we just read is the universal way in which we all can ascend. Now, I had promised a story and I want to share that. I met a lady today who, is very senior, elderly, in her mid-80s, and while we were conversing, she spoke about how beautifully, I interpreted, she had practiced law, helped many people, her husband did the same over here in Pune, and then her children, who are to this day serving the country through politics and through many other fields, and her son-in-law, who passed away unfortunately in one of the terrorist attacks there was in Mumbai, and he was defending other people and the country. What a noble family. I said, you have a very interesting life and such nobility. And we started discussing more about her childhood, and suddenly I told her about our teachings. I said, Paramahansa Yogananda ji taught these universal teachings to Mahatma Gandhi. And she said, oh, I met him a few times. I said, my goodness, you don't look so old, but tell me about it. Do you remember anything? She said, yes, I used to stay in Pune, and he used to come and, at that time, the railway station I think was not there. And she said he used to stay there in a naturopathic doctor, Dr. Mehta's house. And we were staying just across the road. So I used to see Gandhiji, Nehru, Sarojini Naidu, many other luminaries of that time come have their prayer meetings. She said, I went to many meetings myself where he was leading the prayers. And then she said that I gifted him some sweets on Diwali, and he taught me and showed me how to make this hand-spun cloth. And it was so amazing, and I was thinking, my goodness, what an interesting life. But then I said, that if we do not know how to exit this plane altogether, you see that people don't know this very common thing about Mahatma Gandhi. Common because he preached it all the time, but I don't know how many people know this fact. In his autobiography, My Experiments with Truth, his opening line, I think, in the introduction is, let every reader know that everything that I have done in my life has been for one goal alone, my search for God. And Paramahansa Yogananda ji said that he was a man who sincerely wanted to do the will of God. How many Indians, how many people across the world who follow Gandhiji's teachings, or those who know, explore that? There is nothing else to be found. Even the father of our nation said, I want nothing but God. God is one who created not just us and our planet, but Yogananda ji said, countless other planets, countless other universes. And when we think of the enormity of all of it, I think then we can understand how I was feeling in that living room this evening said, my goodness, even with a kind of life like that, I would only pray that all people move in that direction and come to realize. Otherwise, you see, it can bring sadness. Oh, those were the golden days. Oh, those were the times, which probably they were. They were very noble people. But we can always sink back into, I'm not happy right now. Whereas Krishna is saying, with the dream that I have created, it is for your education. Today, what we learned is coming under education. Entertainment, how can that come? By practicing and by merging our consciousness by the help of grace of God and Gurus into the light, from where, like Krishna said, there is no return unless He wills it. God bless you. Joy to you.